Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here on a Saturday morning, rainy Saturday morning. We have a lot of work to do. We have a big panel with seven very interesting and very different speakers, which I'm going to introduce in a minute. And it's actually remarkable that we have the Western Balkans personified here in the stage, on the stage of the Tatra Summit. Let me introduce them. We have as our host Mr. Lukas Parizek, who is State Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you
Good
for
morning.
hosting us. We have Mr. Igor Crnadak, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you very much for being with us. We have Mr. Enver Hoxhaj, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kosovo.
Morning.
We have Mrs. Vasilka Popuska-Treneska, who is the Macedonian ambassador to the Republic of Slovakia.
Macedonia.
Macedonia.
Slovakia.
Macedonia.
The Macedonian ambassador,
Yeah.
I said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Odeta Barbuluci, good morning.
Good morning.
She's from Albania, the Deputy Foreign Minister. We have Aleksandar Pejovic, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Montenegro.
Morning.
Welcome. We have Roxandra Nincic, who is the Political Director of the Serbian Foreign Ministry.
Morning.
I'm very pleased also that we have a very diverse panel after a couple of all-male panels. So happy to have you all here.
See you.
Now I will give the floor to Mr. Parizek for his opening, and then we can start with this panel. Because we are so many, I have asked our panelists to keep it short. Mr. Parizek, as the host, has a small privilege. So you have, I think you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Vesela. It's an honor to have the privilege to speak the first today, and I would like you to let me join the crowd in welcoming you all here in Slovakia at the Tatra Summit, at the well-rooted and prominent international conference designed to discuss the most pressing European political, economic, and financial affairs. I'm truly glad that we have the panel with and about the Western Balkans. I really like the title very much, as I believe that we are really indeed missing a piece of the puzzle in the European project. So, ministers, state secretaries, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 70 years ago, we had a dream, a great idea, a Europe without boundaries. A place where people live in peace, where prosperity, freedom, and the rule of law are fundamental imperatives. Today we know that the vision of European unity became very much real, and most of the countries may sit together around one table, discuss and decide the most pressing issues. However, we still face a number of problems. Our citizens feel the impact of global economic and financial crises, and of course the influx of migrants. It has created unprecedented internal fragmentation within the Union. It also evoked deep contemplation about the security, cultural identity, ethnic and religious cohabitation in the European Union. I have to admit that this was probably also one of the factors behind the recent British referendum that we refer to as Brexit. Political forces offering radical ideas and quick solutions are on the rise. The Union is becoming the victim of its own success. Its citizens take advantages of membership for granted, and they expect even more. They want new ideas, effective solutions, and tangible results. The peace as a primary driving force is being neglected. Democracy and common values are not enough anymore. We need to undertake substantial internal changes in order to eliminate the fragmentation and ultimately avoid the dissolution. After a long period of integration, the EU faces a real threat of disintegration. Thanks to our common, persistent work, our neighborhood of Western Balkans progressed quite considerably. The public discourse in many countries has finally shifted from security-dominated issues to state building and the agenda of European integration. Major achievements on regional cooperation have been reached. One example is the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, which generated significant results over the last couple of years. I am strongly convinced that it will remain so despite of being currently negatively challenged. Nevertheless, the business in the region is still unfinished. Even 21 years after the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina and 17 years after the war in Kosovo, we still cannot consider the situation in Western Balkans as stable. The internal situation remains very sensitive in some of the states. There is a potential for tensions, unresolved issues, and setbacks. Therefore, Slovakia advocates a broad EU enlargement with the region and the engagement with the region as well. The Western Balkans has always played a critical role in European security. The EU is not able to become a more serious actor with uncertainty just on its borders. I believe it is essential that the entire surrounding of the European Union is stable and given a due care. We need to bear in mind how the world around us is still changing. We have to use the instrument of enlargement in order to stabilize our neighborhood. As long as countries keep faith with the European project, it is important that the EU will keep faith with the countries. Unemployment, uncertainty, and corruption are among the great challenges all countries of this region have to face nowadays. Extremism and radicalization are among the threats which may arise from those economic problems. The key, which I consider as the most important in solving these economic problems, lies in enforcement of the rule of law, which is the first pillar of the new approach to the enlargement. From our own experience, I may state that it really generates foreign direct investment, creates more jobs, and ultimately higher standard of living. Let me commend the actions and measures taken in the fight against terrorism and extremism. It brings results and strengthens security in these turbulent times. It is important to continue in the endeavor and win the hearts and minds of the young people so they do not fall into a trap of extremism. Last but not least, I have to stress that it is absolutely essential to continue to tackle the three main regional topics. First, the name issue of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. The second, integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the third is the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. Ladies and gentlemen, let me kindly pass the floor back to Vesela, and I'm very much looking forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this very clear introduction. Also, thanks for keeping the time. We heard several keywords here. Slovakia is obviously a very strong advocate for the Balkans. And the enlargement process seems to be going forward. Although, as many say, Europe is Balkanizing, it seems that the Balkans continue to Europeanize. We have been calling this kind of a constructive ambiguity about the outcome. The process is important, but we will not tell you how this all will end. The question is, I guess, is this enough nowadays? And I'm going to ask this question to all six of you. I will ask you for short answers. Do you think that the enlargement process as it is now is enough to bring your countries forward? Or to put it upside down, what would your countries do without it if enlargement would stop tomorrow? Who would like to go first? Please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm particularly glad to see so many young people in the audience on Saturday morning, which means you had to sacrifice your Friday night, obviously. I don't know about other languages. In Serbian, vesela means jolly, joyful,
yes.
happy. So I hope this will be kind of atmosphere of this panel. To get back to the first question, I think from the perspective of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the importance of the enlargement is huge. We have at least three very important reasons that are recognized not only by politicians, or least by politicians, more by people, because we have about 80% support of the people for the European integration process. And the key reasons that they they talk about when you ask them is, first, security, because we had so many wars in our country, and people perceive the end of the enlargement process as the stopping all the wars and atrocities that were behind us, not only 20 years ago, but centuries behind us. Second, people hope for better economy, for more jobs, for better everyday perspective for them and their kids. And third, people see European integration process and membership to EU as a sure way to the justice, because the perception, and not only perception, the corruption itself is a huge problem back home, and we are probably one of the countries, or maybe the only country, that still does not prosecute the high-level corruption. People think that this will be the way to making accountable all those who did, let's say, bad things in that part. So for us, it's very important. 20th of September was an important day for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Our application was accepted. In December, we expect the famous questionnaire to be within our institutions, and to prepare the answers in next 6 months. And we hope, to be very frank, now for the firmer and I would say decisive support by EU more than ever so far, because now we have to face exactly issues of the corruption, of the privatized.
But if there is no support from the EU?
Yeah, I'll just come to that at the very end. So the real issues are tough issues now in front of us, and it is very hard to answer the question, what if the enlargement process would stop? Of course, life wouldn't stop, we would go on, but it would be a bad thing for Bosnia and Herzegovina, for Western Balkan countries, but also, I believe, a very bad thing for European Union as well, because to finish with an answer to the title of the panel, yes, we are the missing puzzle. We are a missing puzzle because this puzzle needs to be completed within our countries, but also it needs to be completed within European continent. And on the recent crisis, especially the one on migrants, we saw that for real issues, for real dangerous and important issues on European continent, we need not European Union answer, but European answer, which means that we need to work together. So I truly believe that it is a mutual interest for EU and for Western Balkan countries to continue, and on our side we will do whatever possible to be concentrated, to be focused on this by our side.
Thank you very much. We're going to come back to the migration aspect and to the broader security question in a little bit. So thanks a lot for pitching this. Mr. Hoxha, yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and many thanks for organizing this great event. I think it's very important for us in the Balkans, but I think it is very important also for the European Union. I don't think that as somebody who is coming from academia to politics in the Balkans as a former professor, but also as a politician from the Balkans that I would be able in 2-3 minutes to provide you with a clear answer, as we need sometimes, as former professors,
45.
around 45 to make a point. But I'll try to be actually as short as possible. When I see here with us in 2 friends from the Balkans, Eduard Kukan, who has been a big supporter of the region for years, and Karel Schwarzenberg, both of them ministers of Foreign Affairs some years ago. I have just to go back to the times where both of them were trying to support the region regarding peace, stability, and security. What I'm trying to say is that in the last 20 years, we made a huge progress by improving the situation in the region. The half of the region is part of European Union and NATO, means a lot to us in the region. Other half is making a huge progress towards membership in European Union. Different countries are at different stage. And I think we should recognize that before we would reflect where we are today. What would happen if the enlargement would stop? My first point to that question is related to the situation of the status quo. We are, for the time being, in the Balkans in the middle of limbo, in the middle of status quo. Exactly what State Secretary said, because of some historic challenges who have been still not addressed, normalization relations between Kosovo and Serbia, without having a situation that Serbia would recognize Kosovo as an independent state. The region will be forever in limbo, in status quo. Another 2 historic challenges, and I wouldn't talk about both of them as friends from Sarajevo and Skopje are here. But we have also other issues who have been not addressed in the last 10 years. There are a lot of political issues, border demarcation issues, minority rights, rule of law, lack of growth, and all of that have put the region in a kind of limbo, in a kind of status quo. Secondly, we don't have the same context in the region as we used to have 2 years ago, 3 years ago. The regional context is changing. It's true that, and it's a fact that the region is having a Euro-Atlantic perspective, but the region was never more threatened as it is today from global threats. And one of them is Russia. I mean, Russia is very much active in the region, and I would be able to reflect on that in more detail. And another threat is coming from the Middle East. That's mean if the enlargement would stop, I think those non-Western, Euro-Atlantic actors might be stronger in the region. And third, we are living in a time where changes are very big in a very short frame of time. For example, Kosovo as a society is not the same as we were 20 years ago. And the question is, are the elites, our economies, our societies, our cultural elites able really to address the needs which we have there if European Union is not supporting us? In that regard, I would be more in favor to have an enlargement policy which would be more flexible to the region by supporting countries to move from one stage to another stage, by not blocking countries to open a chapter or to close a chapter when it comes to the European integration agenda. Beyond that, I think we need to have better support when it comes to economic growth and jobs. I think the European Union did a great job in terms of democratization of the Balkans, in terms of promoting human rights, in terms of supporting us to strengthen the rule of law. But what we need there to do now, in times of limbo in the region, in times of European crisis within the European Union, is focusing mostly in economy. Without economy, I don't think that we would be able really to move to the next stage of society building, which is very crucial for the region.
Mrs. Ninčić, do you think that the third actors that Minister Hoxha just mentioned are a threat for the region from a Serbian perspective.
Which third actors would those be?
Well, he mentioned threats from MENA, threats from Russia, non-Euro-Atlantic actors, as I understood him.
Well, obviously, the Balkans may be in limbo, whereas European integration processes are concerned. But the Balkans are very much not in the limbo, whereas global movements, shifts, instabilities, and crises are concerned, because they usually do and currently are having a reflection on the Balkans as well. I think it would be perhaps overstating the danger to say that the Balkans are facing a threat from outside actors that are further away from us, but that they are part of an increasingly unstable, unsettled, and at moments worrisome international mosaic that is certainly not very good for the stability of the Balkans as well. That is a fact, yes.
And do you think that, from a Serbian perspective, that the process so far is going okay?
The enlargement process?
Yes, the enlargement process.
Well, no, I don't think I could quite say that. Of course, of the two ways in which you put the question, where would you be without it and what's going to happen? I don't know where we'd be without it, but what I do know for a fact, not only as an official but as a citizen living in the Balkans, is that the EU integration process has, for the region, for Serbia most certainly, been a firm anchor into a down-to-earth reform process that keeps everybody focused on tomorrow and not grievances of yesterday. It has been an anchor of stability for the whole of the Balkans. And I think that we need, all of us need stability very, very deeply, that it's the deepest need that we all have. Perhaps even more than prosperity, although that would clearly be nice too. The fact that this process is in, as you rightly say, limbo, that we are the most optimistic message we usually get is one of the necessity of strategic patience. I mean, there's something slightly cynical in asking strategic patience of people who are in limbo anyway. We need to be able to have a firm perspective that will deepen the in places still fragile stability of the Balkans, which, as was mentioned before, is not only important for us, although clearly it is the most important thing for us, but one would think it would be important for the European Union too. It is right there, the Balkans as a region. We have cooperated closely in the migrant crisis that you mentioned we'd be going back to, the fight against terrorism, extreme radicalization, which is a problem in particular some parts of the region, in many fields that are of interest to the stability of the European Union as well. Whether the European Union is ready to just let this all go because it has other business to attend to and let the Balkans take care of itself, or whether there will be a will to offer the kind of much more clear and intense support that this region needs at this critical crossroad. This, of course, we will see, and I hope this discussion will be a contribution to as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, because you also touched on the issue of what the Balkans contribute to the EU's security and to the EU more generally. There is a question actually that we received, which reminds me, we are going to pull it up on the screen. Don't ask what your country can do for you, the famous Kennedy quote. What can the Balkans give to the EU? And I think this very much corresponds with what you just said. This reminds me that you, of course, all are invited to ask your questions, put down your comments on the app of the Tatra Summit and to tweet with the hashtag GTS16. And I'm going to return to the panel in the meantime. Who would like to take the floor? Ambassador?
Yes. First of all, let me apologize on behalf of my minister, Nicola Popovsky, for not being able to come today with us and in this important meeting. So, to leave the candidate countries in a constant state of limbo, neither fully in nor fully out, should not be considered a strategy. The EU should be aware of the geopolitical importance of speeding up the European integration process and avoiding different promises of membership. Continuing to exclude the countries of the Western Balkans will only increase the risk of instability politically and socioeconomically, and allow the influence of Europhobic groups to continue undermining the European projects. This is my view of the Balkan countries from my side, from Macedonia. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pevic, do you think your country is in limbo, and what does the European integration do?
Well, thank you, Vesela, and thanks to the Slovak presidency for organizing this, the time of the presidency. It's not just the member state that shows support and interest, but also when the presidency does it, it has a more augmented meaning for the candidates and for the countries of the region. And I think we are rightly positioned now to see how we can progress until the end of the year during the presidency time, but also further on. To answer your question, we have to look at obviously the issues from 2 points of view. One is where we stand with the enlargement policy today, and what it would mean to lose it. The first point is that the enlargement has changed. We have the political message from the beginning of the Juncker term in office, which said no enlargement during this 5 years, which was a political message. Technically completely right, because none of us can really manage to join the European Union in these 5 years. But it has had its effect on the region itself, on the political elites and how it was perceived among the population. Then there is the procedural context where the demands for the enlargement have grown. They have become more complex, become more demanding in the sense that now we are more focused on implementation, which calls for more time and for more effort from the candidates to be performed. And then there is the procedural aspects of the procedures done in the Council and the Commission, which takes now ages, comparing to what, for example, Slovakia or any other country in the big enlargement did. You can see huge difference in dissecting the whole process into small phases, which now take months and years. We see this with the application for Bosnia now, how it takes. We remember our own application, which was for the first time decoupled from the candidate status at the moment when you really start negotiations. Now it has become a standard for the countries. You first get the candidate status, and then only then you can start accession talks upon fulfilling conditions. And then there is some new movements, obviously. There is the economic reform programs that have been seen also as a very useful method and mechanism to improve the economy and fiscal and financial responsibilities of the Western Balkan countries in spite of the crisis, and of course in the face of what's been happening in the EU. And the Berlin process, which has brought a new momentum, a new dynamics, infrastructure, connectivity, and so on. But also there is a lot of those who see these two new mechanisms as a replacement for the enlargement, as a replacement for the final goal of the countries joining. And that brings us to the question of what we might lose with I wouldn't say the enlargement stopped. It will never stop as a policy. It's impossible to think in any serious terms that it would become a no policy of the EU. But we could see a slowdown of the enlargement to that extent, to that dynamics, that it really becomes a no enlargement per se. I'm talking from the point of view of a country which has 24 chapters opened and 2 closed. So we are at the forefront, and we are now midway. We are getting ready for the next phase of closing down chapters. But obviously, there can be threefold effect in this regard of a complete slowdown. One is on the population, and as Igor said, the population of the Balkans expects a lot from the enlargement because the heights are hope. And obviously, the public perception of the EU is not only joining a golden paradise where everything will be nice, your standard will go up, but also the EU, which has invested a lot into creating a feeling among the population that things might change in the Balkans when it comes to the trust in the institutions, to the procedures, to the rule of law, for example. And of course, the fact that when the population, when the people in the region realize that there is no enlargement, then we'll have even more migration, even more emigration from the region, leaving, especially from the young and the skilled. Then there is the impact on the elites, and that is also very dangerous. When you have the elites, the political elites losing the faith or losing this goal of joining the EU, obviously it has two effects. One is that they lose momentum, they lose energy. But the other one is that you get the other political forces in the region that become empowered by this feeling that there is a third way, there is alternative, there is somebody else to look at. And exactly this is the third factor, the foreign influence. What we can see whenever you have the void of the European Union, that the third actors are getting in, be it from the east, be it from the south. But this happens when you have less of the EU in the region, and that leaves a lot of space for some other influences and involvements.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can now turn to Tirana, an Albanian view. Do you think the enlargement is doing the right thing for your country right now, and how would you feel without it?
Well, first of all, allow me to extend my thanks to the Slovak hosts for organizing this panel and for putting this panel in the agenda of this important event, showing attention to the enlargement project and to the region in itself. As it was indeed highlighted by previous speakers in this panel and yesterday too, we are holding this discussion in troubled times for the EU when one gets the feeling that there isn't the most favorable moment to discuss enlargement, and there isn't a mood for moving beyond that status quo of the actual moment, either among elites or the public opinion in European countries. And we are discussing here the Western Balkans, which I strongly believe is the region where the EU transformative power is mostly felt. It's perhaps the region where it is most felt at the moment. And what I mean by this is mainly the EU impact in the internal dynamic in our countries. And speaking particularly here about, I refer particularly to the state building reforms and to the strengthening of rule of law. All our countries here at the moment are in a very important juncture. And I would say it's a juncture which would be, which in a way symbolizes just the moment before a major leap from transition to consolidated democracies. And that's as important as perhaps the leap of democratization or the change of regime in the early 90s for our countries. And the EU impact here has been considerable and has given tangible and concrete effects. And I refer to the perhaps most or freshest example from Tirana, the pressure that the EU exerted with regard to the judiciary reform and how that sort of produced effects and consensus, even though there is an evolution of that, changes, but that showed that the EU still can have a very tangible and concrete effect. In comparison to countries of Central and Eastern Europe, of that first wave or the 2004 enlargement wave, but also to the subsequent later on enlargements, we can see that our countries differ a lot in terms of their democratization political dynamic. Whereas countries of Central Europe, this country included, for them this metaphor of going back to Europe, return to a common home or common house was crucial and was a major push for them in their democratization processes. For our countries now, I think it's clear that for us the challenge was mainly to build a house, not to go back to one, but to build a house, or in other words, to build Europe inside ourselves. And in other words, to build viable democratic institution independent powers of the executive, legislative, media, and other independent institutions which guard democracy, but also strengthen the rule of law and fight against organized crime and corruption. Some of these challenges were mentioned here. But by fighting these particular challenges, we do contribute to common European security. Going back to your question as about what do we give back to Europe, these reforms are crucial to avoid a spillover effect in terms of organized crime and unregulated illegal migration to countries of the EU and so on and so forth. So that is one, I think, the key dimension in which we are still the missing piece in this European puzzle. The second dimension is the security dimension. It was mentioned here. It's very important. We, as a region, we are geopolitically located in that very first front of where the migratory flows come from the south. But of this, let's say, risk and security challenge coming from south, and that is both applies to migratory flows but also terrorism. And in that particular regard, Albania has held, for the past couple of years, has developed a very clear, let's say, concept about regional networks of security. We need to work more towards sharing information, towards fighting organized crime in the region, and also building stronger ties with the EU in that respect. The third, if I may develop that further a bit, is the economic dimension. It was mentioned here by the minister. It's very important.
Can we leave the economic dimension for a little bit later? Because first of all, I'm conscious of the time. We have 40 minutes left. By the way, there is a clock there. And I really appreciate your presentation on the security aspect, because this would be my last question, and then I will stop abusing my right as a moderator. What is the perspective from your different countries to the security imperative of Europe? We heard also from our host a lot about stability. Europeans want the region to be stable, and the Europeans want the region to contribute to European security. Do you think this whole security paradigm in which Europe is more and more entering is a threat to your countries, or is it an opportunity to be more under the spotlight of European attention? And those of you who have already spoken about it don't have to come back, only if some of you would wish to say something on this particular question.
Again for me? Okay. I thought it was change a little bit of order. Well, a couple of messages. First of all,
who takes it first gets it.
First of all, what can we do for European Union? Interesting. It's interesting this version of the famous quote. If you look at it, the role of Kennedy is played by European Union, and he was killed. So my first message was, my first message is that European Union will not be killed, and that we are very much committed as a region to European Union, even with all the challenges and all the problems that it has been facing in last months and years. And why I'm saying this now, it's because I think the security reasons are one of the most important ones. Why is that so? So two parts of this topic, of this issue. First, within the region itself, I think it's very important, and from our perspective, maybe somebody will disagree, but we truly believe that for the region, it's crucial that the triangle, Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, remains stable, remains peaceful. And on that behalf, my first message is that it looks optimistic. No matter some hard rhetorics that we've seen throughout last year, we remain very much optimists on this. Because I really believe that the hard talk in last year was mainly because of the elections. Let me just shortly remind you, Serbia had elections, Croatia had elections 2 times, Bosnia and Herzegovina had local elections that were under the burden of referendum in Republika Srpska. So all that in less than a year in such a turbulent region, the least we could get was the hard talk that we had. So I believe that security-wise, we will be stable, and on that behalf, I would like to commend also the words by new Prime Minister of Croatia yesterday in Sarajevo, who had his first visit after taking office exactly to Bosnia and Herzegovina, saying that they will endorse the agreement among the 3 constitutional people between Republika Srpska and Federation as 2 entities. And after very constructive and positive position that we are having from Serbia, this position by new Croatian government is very encouraging. And the second part of this is the security issue regarding the relations Western Balkans and European Union. I mentioned it at the very beginning. I think the recent migrant crisis showed how it is important that we work together on this, because it is impossible to have the European answer to some really important, really crucial issue without us working together. Because the fact that we are that we are not the union itself does not mean that some issues like these that we've seen can be done without some kind of an agreement. For us, the key issue is to be decisive on things like all kinds of radicalization, terrorism, and also the high-level organized crime issues. On Bosnia and Herzegovina part, for us it is very important, and I would like to underline this part of the panel, that we were the first country in the region that introduced the law on the foreign terrorist fighters. And we've sentenced also already many people to the prison sentences for this, and it's been producing results because we have decreasing number of the foreign terrorist fighters for a couple of years now. And we are very focused on intensifying the exchange of information, working together with the countries from the region, with also important European and worldwide players on this. And it's very important that we stay committed to this, that we really understand that this is maybe at the moment the most important issue we need to work together, because on one side we have to confront all the possible challenges of this nature within our countries, but also European Union must know, because even though I know that people dealing with this understand this, that many challenges and many problems are coming now even from the countries, those countries itself, because most of the terrorist attacks that we've seen in the last couple of years, we saw people that were radicalized and that came into this spiral of violence and of radicalism and terrorism within the very countries like France and Belgium, Austria, and so on.
Thank you very much. I was wondering if your presentation your assessment is shared by the other panelists. I don't know, Minister Hoxha, maybe if you want to give your view to the security issue, do you have anything to add? Because we are short of time. So if you...
I think we could reflect pretty long how it is the security situation in the region and what the Balkans can do for that, which is a very wide item. But regarding your question, what the region could do for Europe, I think the region could do a lot for Europe if we would be able to solve our problems by ourselves. That's mean if European Union is in a process of internal consolidation, as President Juncker said, then I think we should have the same in the Balkans. and internal consolidation means really improving the economic situation in the region. Without that, I don't think that we could do a lot also regarding the security. Secondly, some of the regional challenges which are there, we need to have a timetable how long we need to address them. For example, the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. We would be ready in a timetable 2 to 3 years to sit with our colleagues in Belgrade and to address all possible outstanding issues. And the question is, are also other countries in the region able to do the same? Because those regional historic challenges are keeping the region in a limbo. And in that regard, I was forced to give a very pessimistic view about the situation in the region. What else we could do regarding other security-related issues? For example, refugee and migration flow, which we saw in the last 2 years. I think some of the refugees could be accommodated in the Balkans. I'm not saying that 1 million of them could be accommodated there, as some of the European countries did in that regard a great job. I mean, what Germany was doing in Austria, I think, was something which will go back to the history textbooks. I mean, it was a huge political and human behavior. But some hundreds of them could be accommodated. All of us in this table, in this panel, we have been refugees by ourselves 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago. And the way how we reacted to the refugee crisis in Europe was something which was actually beyond my imagination. It was a kind of silence in the Balkans that nobody wanted to talk and to take a role on that issue. The security situation might be better improved if it is a better coordination between NATO and European Union. What I'm saying is that new momentums which have been created by inviting Montenegro to NATO are momentums not only for Montenegro as a country, but are momentums for the whole region as such. And the question which we have now is how in the next 2-3 years we might be able to create a new momentum, a kind of new breakthrough which could support the region to move forwards. The best year which we have in the last, I would say, 10 years was 2013 when Croatia got membership into the European Union. And that year has inspired a lot of us to make some important steps regarding the European agenda. Of course, I mean, each country made some progress. Kosovo signed a stabilization association agreement. We're in the process of implementing that, but the question is where the region is as a whole.
Thank you very much. I think I will open up now to the audience because we have 30 minutes to go. There are 2-3 questions. I suggest we take them all now. If you can please give a microphone to the gentleman over there, and if you can please introduce
Julian Fota from Romania. 2 very short questions. First of all, could you be more specific on how Middle East is a threat to the region? Somebody mentioned, besides Russia, also Middle East as a threat from outside, so I will appreciate a few more details. And second question, NATO has been mentioned just briefly at the end of your presentations, but I would like also the other members of the panels to discuss a little bit. How do you see the role of NATO, especially accepting the idea that there are also external threats to the region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here, Mr. Kichukov.
Well, speaking about challenges to security, we know that there are a number of fighters in Daesh coming from the Western Balkan countries on one side, and on the other side we know that Balkan Islam in general is a rather moderate one, I'd even say a secular one. What do you think about the Balkan Islam serving rather as a barrier to radicalization of Islam in Europe, or a bridge to radicalization in Europe? And from that point of view, do you think that slowing down the process of accession to the European Union might destabilize and fragmentize societies in Western Balkans?
Milan.
Milan Nič, GlobeSec Policy Institute here in Bratislava. I will also ask questions about external factors. As you said, that migration crisis showed that the region is more exposed to global threats and phenomena. And commenting a question of my predecessor, I would say that as the region is changing, there is also another factor of foreign fighters, or rather fighters from the region going somewhere else to fight, to get experiences, and to bring extremist ideology, and that is Eastern Ukraine, Donbass, and fighters that went there from Serbia and that were exposed in Montenegro to various mischiefs. But my question will be about China and the US. We haven't mentioned China. What is China doing in your countries? How active in investment or in strategic issues you see there? And my second question is about the US engagement. We will have in a couple of days elections in the US. So far, the key factor in stability of your region has been not only your enlargement, but also NATO and American engagement. How we can sustain this? What are you thinking, or what in your capitals are you prepared to offer to the new U.S. administration in terms of arguments why they should stay engaged in your region?
Thank you very much, Milan. Milan has conceptualized this panel. This is why he has the privilege to have a longer question. The microphone behind you.
Good morning, everybody. 2 quick remarks and 2 questions. First, I like the introductory statement, keynote speech by Secretary of State.
Thank you very
Parizek. To me, you sounded positive, and I think that's fine. There are many positive issues in the Balkans, many negative issues. We should concentrate on the positive ones. And the second one, it didn't sound exactly like priorities, but I noticed it, the definition, what are the 3 issues we should pay attention in the Balkans? Name issue, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and dialogue. I don't know whether all the panelists would agree with that, but it's interesting, I noticed that. Question to Igor Crnadak. A year ago or so, the positive momentum was being built about Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now I have a bad feeling that that positive momentum is somehow fading away. Have I got the right feeling? And to my good friend Enver Hoxha, Kosovo should be discussed in Slovakia publicly, the more the better. So I'm asking you this question. I absolutely agree with you that Kosovo is completely different than it used to be several years ago. We somehow take it for granted. It's a great progress. But now to make very decisive steps forward, you have to resolve your internal political situation. The visa-free regime will not be given unless you have the demarcation of the border. Parliament is being brought, but tear gas, paprika spray, everything. Opposition is really very adamant. Can you explain them? It is the patriotic duty to find agreement to move the country forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for asking a question. Ivan Vejvoda. This would be the last question, then we come back to the panel.
Thank you again to GlobeSec and Bratislava for organizing this conference. I'd like to reinforce Milan Nič's question about China. The FT had a title 3 days ago, if China cannot beat Europe, it will acquire Europe. What is China acquiring in our region, the Western Balkans? And second question on energy. Most of our countries very dependent on Russian gas. What are we doing to diversify and interconnect, and is the European Union doing enough to help that effort?
This is, by the way, maybe one of the success stories of the Balkans, but I'll let you explain it. Who would like to go first? If you can keep it brief.
I'll try. I told you that I'm a former professor, and I need a long narrative to make my point. I'm really not able to provide you with a very detailed explanation how I understand external threats in the region because of time limits. But the regional context is not which we had 2-3 years ago. And I think we should recognize that. We had never a situation 5 years ago or 10 years ago that citizens from the Balkans would take part in the conflicts like Ukraine, and there were people who were participating there. I don't need to mention their geographies. We were never had a situation some years ago that somebody would join such organization like Daesh, like IS. But we have the foreign fighters phenomenon. And in that regard, a region which is more fragmented, a region where external actors might stronger penetrate, where sometimes they are trying to support a coup in a country or something like, should be understood in more realistic terms, as sometimes we are able to understand in the region, and our friends in Brussels are able to assess this, what's mean this to the region. But the regional context is wholly new after March 2014. And I think we should be more aware of that. How much US is engaged? I think without the US support and US engagement, beyond great job with European Union is doing, beyond the enlargement policy, but US is viewed in the Balkans in very classical terms as a power which might be able to provide the country with a frame of stability and security and even predictability. You know, predictability is very important in the life of societies, in the life of states. I think we wouldn't be able to make the progress which we made so far. And I see from, in Kosovo view, we have the same commitment from US, Milan, as we had some years ago. Regarding the internal situation in Kosovo, I fully agree with Eduard. I think what is happening in the last 2 years in Kosovo is the same what is happening in the region. The whole region and all countries in the region, we moved from a stage of state building to the stage of society building. And one of my very favorite scholar, Lord Dahrendorf, said once, you can break down a government in 6 months. You can improve the economy in 6 years, but you cannot build a society in 60 years. And tensions which we have between government and opposition, sometimes at home, and tensions which we have in all other countries between governments and opposition, a kind of division in our society, have to do with this second stage where the Balkans is, for the time being, building societies. And building societies, it's more complex than we think.
Yeah, please.
Because we didn't give the floor to Alexander the last round, let's give him the chance now.
Yes, I'll try to touch upon some of the issues. First, NATO and security itself. Obviously, NATO has played a major role in our politics for the last year or so. We have had elections recently where NATO was the most divisive and more decisive issue to be actually decided by the voters, and it took most of the basically election pre-election period where NATO figured as the most important issue to be decided through the political vote that the people gave. We ended up with a parliament now which has 3/5 of the parliament of the MPs who would be voting for the ratification of the Washington Treaty, which is very reassuring in the fact that we actually managed to show that joining NATO is not just a security issue, it's also a stability issue, it's also economy issue, it's also belonging to a wider kind of security architecture that could provide a good platform for the future of negotiations with the EU. We are now midway through the ratification process among the allies, so I guess that the process should be finished somewhere in wintertime and for the spring for Montenegro to join. But as Enver said, this is not just the issue of Montenegro. It is a wider issue, a regional one, where our joining also has an impact on the other countries, on the other concepts that are perceived in the region, on what the alliance means. And talking about puzzles, obviously, we were the last bit of the puzzle in the northern Mediterranean shores, which was missing for NATO. This brings us also to the issue of other factors and other influences when it comes to the region, and obviously what we can offer to the EU and also to our American partners. It is definitely by stabilizing the region, by bringing it more into the architecture, you get less radicalization, you get less extremism, you get also the region within the procedures, either asylum, border security, migration procedures, which are able to cope with the issues such as the migration was and how it impacted the region itself. We still don't see the final impacts of what it could have in the next period, but obviously leaving the Balkans as a soft belly would bring benefit to no one. And finally, to touch upon China, obviously this is something that we are discussing with our European partners. There is a lots of ideas on how to invest and what to invest in the region. You see that the Berlin process opened up the Pandora box of the wishes of the countries in the region, or what and how we should build more on the energy infrastructure and the road network, railway, and so on. But this is just the network. The Berlin process offers only money for the feasibility studies and the start of the projects. Where can the Western Balkans governments find the money for financing these projects? And this is the question. I think that what we are missing within the wider issue of the Berlin process is this connection with the enterprises, with the private investments, and how to connect with the EU member states in order to be more present when it comes to the finalization of the projects. Just recently, we decided to have the biggest energy project that Montenegro will have in these 30 years assigned to the Czech and the Slovak partners. This is good news, of course, for the region. But on the other hand, the Chinese are building a motorway in Montenegro, the biggest transport infrastructure project. So we have to to understand that also in Riga, we are in a few days going to discuss about the Chinese involvement, also under the auspices of the member states of the EU, so which are also belonging to the process. So I think we need to reconsider how the EU is positioning itself from the point of view of investing in the region, in order to discuss whether we can talk about less Chinese influence in the Western Balkans.
In that sense, the question, the EU as a buffer or as a bridge, the Balkans as a buffer or as a bridge to the EU. What is your take?
I think that the EU is for the Balkans for the EU is exactly as you said, as you put the name of the panel, is the last missing puzzle in the further securitization, the further stabilization of the whole of the continent. And then I didn't mention, but the final idea is that what the joining of the Balkans brings is also reinforcement of the European ideas and values. Now, with the Brexit on, I think this is a very valuable idea that we have to catch on and to use in the next years.
Odeta, you wanted to add something, maybe to one of the questions?
I'll try to be brief on the security question you posed with regard to whether this is an opportunity for us or not, for the Balkans, or it is a further challenge. And I wouldn't say it is an opportunity as such, but the actual moment and the current security challenges have put the Balkans on that forefront and in the radar, and had made it evident that the EU and the Balkans should work together to address and to face the same common European security challenges. Now, as I represent here perhaps the oldest NATO member in this panel, I feel compelled to make a comment with regard to NATO, and we think that stronger NATO-EU cooperation, particularly with regard to the southern flank and to challenges coming from that part, is crucial. We did welcome the conclusions of the Warsaw Summit. We were the first country to ratify the agreement, the protocol, with regard to NATO membership for Montenegro, and there was a very clear reason for that, and very strong consensus, not only the parliament, but also in the public opinion, how important that membership and the closer relationship of all countries of the Western Balkans with NATO is for the overall security of the region. And in that regard, we did also welcome and appreciate that the request of Kosovo for a more institutionalized relationship with NATO was taken into consideration, has been given attention in those conclusions of the Warsaw Summit. In terms of practical and concrete contribution, It was only a few days ago that the government took the decision to have a military presence, a military ship in the Aegean, as part of that contribution in the security front. But there was also a question with regard to terrorism and how pertinent the question of foreign terrorist fighters has become for the region. And in that, to answer that question, I would mention only maybe one or two more concrete achievements, which I would say is region one. Well, it's the commitment of our countries that are represented here in the framework of CECP conclusions last year in February in Tirana to work together and to see terrorism and foreign terrorist fighters encountering violent terrorism as extremism, as a common challenge. And in that framework, we are committed to build a regional anti-terrorism center, which in a way materializes this commitment of all our countries. And the focus, the area where we are focusing mostly, is education and prevention. For us and for our societies, going again back to the societal challenge, if you like, it's very important that we work on the education front and parallel to that in the employment front, or investing more in employment of young people, investing more in professional training of young people. So these two must go parallel to each other: education and instilling civic values, European values, if you like, and investing in youth employment.
I think this is important also, given that some of the migration challenges that the EU has been facing before the big refugee wave came from the south were actually related to migration from the region to the EU. So I think also that element needs to be mentioned. Roxanda, I don't know if you want to take one or two of the questions. We have the China question that I guess still also has a Serbian angle. We have an energy question, and I would invite also somebody else from the panel to think about the energy question, please.
First things first.
Okay.
The question of whether the darkening security clouds over Europe are perceived as by us as a threat or as an opportunity. Well, the two things are not necessarily divorced from each other. I hope we are not at the level of a real security threat yet, but challenges certainly, and we are aware of them and looking at them closely. Of course, they could also be an opportunity, as was mentioned. We would very much like to be part of a common EU response to the security threats Europe is facing today, be it terrorism, be it the radicalization of the young, which we consider a particular threat, be it the migrant crisis. But one example of the migrant crisis has shown that there is a slight glitch there. We have, since the onset of the crisis, asked what is the common European policy on this so that we can find our place in it. The missing piece of the puzzle: how can we contribute to a European policy on the migrant crisis? There was no European policy, coherent policy. So how do you use an opportunity of being, all right, even a buffer of the EU, in cooperation with the EU, if the EU does not have a coherent policy, and therefore we do not know exactly what one's role in, I stress, the EU policy would be. Individual countries are of course another story. Of the China angle, just briefly, I agree with what my colleague and friend Andrea Pevic said a minute ago. Yes, we are preparing for Riga as well as carefully as you are, but then of course the question came from Slovakia itself. China has a policy of cooperation with Central and Eastern Europe towards where we are a part of it too. China, of course, yes. Mm-hmm. We are very interested in furthering all possibilities of cooperation there. The whole world is interested in cooperating with China. It would be odd to think that we would not. China is, of course, mostly interested in infrastructure. We have big infrastructural needs that, as Andre also mentioned, are not always possible to address through other choices that might be our first. So yes, this cooperation will continue. And just briefly on cooperation with NATO. Serbia firmly pursues a policy of military neutrality, but we have a very intensive cooperation with NATO. We have hundreds of activities going on with them through the Partnership for Peace. Our Prime Minister will be visiting NATO in the coming weeks. The Secretary General recently visited Serbia. We congratulate on each and every occasion Montenegro's joining. We will also congratulate Bosnia and Herzegovina should they decide to do so. We believe in, just to draw a line under all these various jumping around bits of the puzzle, that yes, we can offer a contribution to stability and security in Europe, but that we must do it also on a basis of supporting the security and stability of each other. Serbia has been recognized by the EU, given a significant contribution to the stability of the region on a daily basis, but also in several critical moments that have appeared over the past couple of years. And we will, regardless of various underminings of this process, firmly continue to do so. We would very much like to see the same respect and care for our stability in the region from all partners. In any case, in Serbia, there will always be an outstretched hand for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was a clear message. Do we get a very short Bosnian intervention?
It's going to be short, but I think there were 3 or 4 questions, so 4 times short. I don't know if it will be short. First of all, I'd like to thank Edward Kukan for the question. Edward is a great friend of the country, and I'm happy to see him here today. The question is coming at the right time. So if you ask me, first of all, we should go back just for a couple of years. Bosnia and Herzegovina was stalled for 7 years. And last year, we had the first time, after 7 years, in the report by European Commission, progress noted. Unfortunately, that was the year when the name of the report was changed from progress report to country report. So exactly the year when we had the first progress.
It's probably better to have a country
next
than
year,
to
no
have
report.
a progress.
Yeah. So if you ask me if we went back after very good start of the new Council of Ministers and new presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, did we go back to this bad period of 7 years? I would say no. No, but also if you ask me if we are keeping the pace from the beginning of this positive part, also the question is we are not keeping this pace. Unfortunately, we had a couple of unnecessary, senseless issues like the census issue and the breach of political agreement on how it should be implemented, like this senseless challenge of Deo Republika Srpska that opened the process and open the space for the very populist forces that led to this referendum that is attracting all the attention, unfortunately, recently. But even having all that in mind, I think that the political parties and individuals focused on the continuation of the reforms and European integration process will prevail, even though I must underline that the real answer to Edward's question and his thoughts on Bosnia and Herzegovina will be given on the elections 2018. The other question I wouldn't want to miss because I wouldn't like to be seen as somebody dodging it is the one regarding the Muslims and the role of Balkan Islam in all the issues that we are talking about. I think it is right to say that really Balkan, and I will speak now about Bosnia and Herzegovina because we have almost 50% of Muslims in the country. It's always been kind of a soft Islam, non-violent Islam. And I think two things are very important. First, that we do not go in Europe and worldwide into some kind of Islamophobia. And we are seeing it a little bit. But maybe even more important is that we get clear messages without any space for misunderstanding by key Muslim politicians and key Muslim position holders in this part of Europe. And I think it's good that in Bosnia and Herzegovina last year we had from different parties, from academy, from politics, from all around, Bosniaks, Muslims gather and saying some very direct messages on Islamic State, on different terrorist challenges. And I think these two are very important. So the internal and the external approach to this issue to continue. China?
Yeah, we don't have time for China.
Thank you.
I thank you. I want Mr.
I had
Minister
United
ahead of
States as
time.
well. So.
You know what? Because we have 2 minutes, and I'm under very strict instructions, I'm going to give the floor to the host for last 2 sentences. If there is any burning one sentence that any of you would like to say as closing words, otherwise I would ask our host to maybe say very briefly a closing
Yep, thank
statement.
you. As I was privileged to open this panel, now I feel even more like blessed to have the last remarks. And it's very important what you said. It's just a short note that you said we don't have time for China. I can assure everybody here that China has time for us regarding its history and how they perceive time at all, and this is true. But I wanted to say also thank you to Mr. Kukan for his very positive comments and encouraging ones to my speech, which was meant to be positive. And it was meant to be positive because we are also, it's like our slogan during the EU presidency, we want to focus on the positive agenda. So there is no need to talk about how the things don't work, but we really want to focus on where we can achieve more. And regarding Balkans, everybody here sitting with me knows that this is a priority of our foreign policy. It always has been. My minister is and was quite a lot involved in the affairs in the Balkan region, and he says hi to all of you. So from our side, I can assure that you are on our priority, not just during the presidency, but you will be our priority also after the presidency. And it's very important that the challenges that were mentioned that the EU is facing today, and the countries separately in the Western Balkans as well, some of them are common, like migration, but some of them are pretty individual. And as Minister Crnadak said and mentioned the elections, we can see plenty of elections going on in Western Balkans. Some of them were successful, some of them not that successful, and some of them did not happen yet. And we can see that elections can be a bit of a challenge, even in the United States.
Well, in
Yes.
Europe, there are also a couple of important elections coming up.
And yes, and in the European Union, I wanted to mention that we have referendums, which are quite a huge challenge for us. So it is important that the perception of the public, which was mentioned by my Albanian colleague, is addressed in the European Union separately and also in Balkans separately, because I would understand if there was frustration from the European Union when we see we have our internal challenges and the public does not really, may not support the enlargement process once the internal challenges are not solved. And this is something that we can see also from the other side. So it is important to stay focused, to be positively minded and keep the positive approach. And the last sentence, I know I'm taking a lot of time. I just wanted to also thank Mr. Pejovic for his positive remarks on our presidency, and I see he has our presidency tie, so I understand if it was a tie competition, he would be the most supporting guy of the EU project, so thank you for that. Thank you.
I suggest there are a couple of ladies that also have something to say about the tie, but that's for another time. Be positive was also the message that Milan Nietzsche has in this framing paper for this panel. I would encourage you to read it. I wanted to quote from it, but we don't have the time. If Europe is going to be a fortress and the Balkans are going to be a buffer or a bridge, this is, I guess, something that we can do in our next panel in next year's Tatra Summit. Maybe we can think about it as a drawbridge. If this is, this is not very encouraging, but some kind of explanatory metaphor, I would like to ask you to thank these brave panelists, all 7 of them who sat through this. This was a very fascinating discussion. Thank you really very, very much also for being very good with the time and with me. Thank you. And I have been asked to tell you that refreshments are available just outside in the lobby, and that we have to be back in our seats exactly at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.